Let's see if anybody hops on before I say what I'm going to talk about. I think I made my glasses worse, did I? Must just be my eye tonight. I just can't see out of my eye. Hello, hello. If you're just hopping on, tell me who you are, where you're from. Hello, hello. Hello. Anybody there? If you're just hopping on, tell me who you are, where you're from. Hello. My name is Renee. Welcome. Hello, hello. Hopefully they'll let your comments come through because TikTok's not been very good about that lately. Hello, hello. If you're just hopping on, tell me who you are, where you're from. Hello, hello. If they let your comment come through. They're not letting comments come through a lot lately. Or I get every third comment. I don't know why they do that. I apologize, it's dark. I wanted to do it in my room tonight and my ring light is broken. So, yeah. Hello, hello. If you're just hopping on, tell me who you are. We're not shy here. If you're just hopping on, tell me who you are, where you're from. My name is Renee. Welcome if you're new here. Hello. Hopefully they're letting comments come through. Sometimes they don't. The other night they wouldn't let comments come through at all. Hardly at all. So if you're just hopping on, tell me who you are, where you're from. Maybe we'll have a live if I get comments. We're just going to discuss grief tonight. If you're new here, my name is Renee, and that's what we talk about. We talk about grief and loss, and yeah, and we'll just wait for a few minutes, see if anybody else is going to get on, and then I'll tell you why I'm here and who I am if you're new here. Abed, how are you, buddy? Thank you for the heart me. I appreciate that. How have you been, buddy? We're going to talk about just grief and some of the symptoms and the stages, and I haven't talked about that in a while, so I thought I like to do that every couple months, and it's probably been about 6, so yeah. Hopefully they're letting comments come through, because I know the other night I didn't get all the comments. What if somebody can't come out of grief and it keeps lingering on? Well, what I would say is you have to figure out what part of the grief is lingering and you need to heal that. Generally, you have to feel it to heal it. So there's some part of that grief that you're not dealing with, and that's why it's lingering. That would be my guess. Thank you for the likes. I appreciate that, Abed. Like for me, for instance, right? I told everybody, you know, my biggest struggle in my grief process was the anger, right? And I thought I had dealt with it. Sorry, I just tipped my drink over. I didn't know if I had the lid on right. I thought I had dealt with it, and then I really hadn't, right? And, you know, it was up until last fall, early winter, before I was able to finally journal to him and say I wasn't angry with him anymore. So yeah, so I would say it's a stage of grief that's lingering. You have to figure out what stage that is, whether it be the guilt, anger, whatever it is, right? And you gotta feel it. You gotta to heal that. So if you're just hopping on, tell me who you are, where you're from. If you're not familiar, my name is Renee. Welcome. I'm just going to see if a few more people are going to hop on before I get started. But we're just kind of having a discussion tonight about grief, some of the stages and the symptoms of it, and what do we do with that. So if you're here, tell me who you are, where you're from. If you don't mind tapping that screen, that really does help me. All right, well, it looks like we're just going to plateau out. So I'm just going to get started. So if you're new here, my name is Renee. I've been on TikTok for 2 years last month. The reason why I started my TikTok is because in September of 2023, my husband unalived himself for TikTok purposes. And that's when I discovered that I had abilities to talk to my guides, and they slowly breadcrumb me to my purpose, which is to help other people with loss and trauma. And so if you're not familiar with my story, thank you, Bobby, for liking the live. I appreciate that. If you're not familiar, my husband and I were together for 32 years. And in that 32 years, we were never apart more than 2 weeks. And so, hey, Jen, thanks for the likes. Like I said, we were never apart more than 2 weeks. And so when my husband left, everybody just kept telling me, Renee, put one foot in front of the other. And I didn't know how to do that. I could barely breathe, right? And so I had to learn how to deal, right? And my husband didn't leave me in a great spot financially. And so therapy was out. Group therapy wasn't going to work for me. I knew, because I'm the circle that don't fit in the square. I'm the unique girl. And so, like I said, once I decided, okay, I'm going to stay on this planet, I have to figure out a way to heal myself. And so I started to deep dive into meditation and into journaling, and I started to heal. So if you're just hopping on, tell us who you are, where you're from. If you're not familiar, my name is Renee. Welcome. We had a couple people hop on and hop back off, so just kind of waiting. Jen, I've been thinking about it. My numbers really dropped when I went back time slots, and I hate to go up a time back to 8 o'clock here, but I don't know. I'm starting to wonder. Just curious what your thought is on that, since it seems to be just you and I. I know it's a little bit later, and I hate to do that because it's already hard for me to focus with my brain, but so if you're just hopping on, tell us who you are, where you're from. Hello. Tonight we're just having a discussion about grief, some of the symptoms of grief, what are some of the stages of grief. T, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. I mean, for you it'd be 7 o'clock, so we'd be going back to 7 o'clock, which I always did out there. It would just be later for me here. So it just seemed like I had a better... It seems like the later I go, I don't know, there's more people on, or I don't know. Anyway, so we need to talk about that. But if you're just hopping on, tell me who you are, where you're from. My name is Renee. Welcome. Tonight we're just having a discussion about grief and loss, symptoms, and stages of grief. If anybody's had a loss, that's what we talk about here. I created my page so people would know my story of my loss and how I helped myself heal. And I'm here so other people know that they're not alone. So if you're just hopping on and you're new here, tell us who you are, where you're from. Hopefully it's letting comments come through. I know the other night it didn't let comments come through. Was it last night? Were we on last night? Yeah, because I know Jesse said he tried to comment and it didn't come through, which is not shocking. So if you're just hopping on, tell me who you are, where you're from. Hello, hello. Thanks for the likes, Jen. TV from Venice, Florida. I am well, thank you. How are you? What's the weather like in Florida right now where you're at? Got to be better than Iowa where I'm at. Well, welcome to my page. I'm glad that you're here. Anybody that's just hopped on, if you've had a loss or something you would like to talk about, let me know. That's what we talk about here. One of the things, usually we talk a lot about loss. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about grief. And the stages of grief, as the AI summary says, 82, beautiful for April. Everybody seems to be having higher temps for April. I know where I was in California was having record temps. Last month, they were like, and maybe even was the end of February, it was like 100 and something there. So, of course, it's a desert, but yeah. So, if you're just hopping on, tell me who you are, where you're from. So I'm just kind of going to get started. Like I said, I've been here for 2 years. My purpose in life is to help other people with their loss. I lost my husband about 2.5 years ago now. I basically worked through that loss myself. And so that's why I'm here. This is my purpose. I only have 2 rules on my page. I just ask that you always be kind. And the other one is, as we talk absolutely no politics here. It's not against one side or the other. It's just not at all what we talk about. There's a million other pages out there for that. And then I always just like to say, I'm on my journey of life where I am, and you're on your journey of life where you are. And none of us are going to agree on everything. So we disagree on this page. And if you can't do that, I just ask that you hop off and keep scrolling. So if you're here, and you're new, introduce yourself. We are not shy here. My page depends on you commenting. Hopefully TikTok lets your comments come through. That's where the struggle's been lately. But we're going to talk about grief, and we're just going to have a discussion. So if you've got something to add, pipe up, please. Like I said, my page depends on you. And so the stages of grief, denial, right? That's one of them. Shock or disbelief. Right. And for me, when I lost my husband, it was a huge shock. My husband, for TikTok purposes, if you're not aware, took his life. Or should I say unalived himself? I have to be careful or they'll kick me off. So my husband unalived himself about 2.5 years ago. And so obviously that was a huge shock, a huge disbelief. And for me, it took me at least a good week, almost 2 weeks, just to be able to wrap my brain around that. And so, that disbelief is common, right? Or denial. And I'm the type of person that I seclude myself until, I can wrap my brain around it. And so that's what I did. I'm not saying that's how everybody is or how everybody works. But for me, that's kind of where my journey was. My entire world of 32 years crumbled that day that he made that choice. I didn't have a life to go back to. He basically, by his decision, changed my entire life, my entire world. But then I discovered that I had abilities and that I could talk to my guides, and they slowly breadcrumbed me to my purpose, which was that I had to go through everything that I went through so I could help other people with their loss and their grief. And so that's why I'm here. I'm here to share my story and hopefully, people know then that, one, you're not alone and you don't have to go through this alone. This is what my community is for. So what's another one? Anger. Like I said, don't be shy. And if you can tap that screen, that really does help me. Those hearts really do help, guys. Anger, feeling frustrated or looking for someone to blame, right? For a little while, I did blame myself, which kind of falls into the guilt or kind of denial stage, more guilt. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But for me, I was just angry with him. I was angry that he stole everything that I had built for 32 years, right? Just gone, poof, crumbled by his one choice. And so anger was the hardest thing. If you're new here, tell us who you are, where you're from. My name is Renee. Welcome. If you're not familiar with my journey, like I said, anger was the hardest for me to get over. Life was very difficult in the last 2.5 years. I've literally been to hell and back. And in that 2.5 years, there's been a lot of struggles, and which created a lot of anger towards him for leaving me in a position that he did. So if you're just hopping on tonight, we're just having a discussion about grief and the stages of grief and kind of how to work through that, and some of the symptoms and all of that good stuff. We're not shy here. So pipe in anytime. Tell me who you are, where you're from. If you're not familiar, my name is Renee. And a lot of times people are looking for somebody to blame, right? Maybe a loved one passed with a loss, that was, somebody took somebody, right? Does that make sense? I have to be careful what I say. Somebody unalived someone else, right? And so sometimes you're looking for somebody to blame. And so you got to work through those emotions also. So, and that's one of the things that I've learned on my journey in the 2.5 years is that you have to feel it to heal it. There's no way around it. You just can't, right? And that's why a lot of people don't heal. Lulu, thank you for the likes. I appreciate it. I'm glad to see you again tonight. And that's why a lot of people don't heal, right? Is because they don't want to have to feel that. So that's part of it. So the next stage is bargaining, dwelling on what if scenarios, right? My husband unalived himself, if you weren't familiar. And there was a lot of what ifs. What if I didn't leave him that morning and go to my brother's? What if I would have walked back sooner when my alarm bells in my head my intuition was going off? What if, I hadn't told the hospital that he was okay, a day or two before? There's all kinds of what ifs, right? And we can always try to throw those what ifs out there. But the thing is the what ifs won't bring that person back. So all you're doing is, you're creating agony for yourself. So if you're just hopping on, tell me who you are, where you're from. Hopefully they're letting comments come through tonight. My name is Renee. Welcome. We're just having a discussion about grief and loss. If you've had a loss and you need to share or need to talk, or you're just feeling lonely, welcome. This is what my community is for. So, okay, so bargaining. The what ifs, what we just talked about. Now the depression, right? The deep sadness, the emptiness, the loneliness, right? And I felt all of these things when my husband left. Deep sadness because I had never lived an adult life without him. I was 16 years old when I met him. We spent 32 years together, no more than 2 weeks apart in those 32 years. And so great sadness and great loneliness, right? I was very lonely. I had never been alone in my adult life ever. And so learning how to cope with that. Richard, thank you for the likes. I appreciate that. Welcome to my page. So if you're just hopping on, tell us who you are, where you're from. Tonight, we're just having a discussion about grief, the stages of grief, some of the symptoms, and what we can do to help with that. Okay, so acceptance, coming to terms. Like I said, when my husband unalived himself, it took me about 2 weeks, a good week and a half, 2 weeks to really wrap my head around what had happened, right? I was in the denial, that shock, right? And so that's the next one, denial. This is when people sweep it under the rug, right? We're in denial. It didn't happen, and I know in the very beginning, my oldest daughter was struggling with, no, he's not gone, right? The denial, we want to, no, this is just a bad dream and he's going to come back and he's going to be, he's going to be here. And so, unfortunately, when we go into that stage, of denial, and a lot of times, it's easier for people, like I said, to sweep it under the rug and just decide instead of, I'm not going to deal with my feelings, that what just happened. And so maybe you turn to drugs or alcohol or some other vice, and what I tell people all the time is you can sweep it under the rug for so long, but eventually you're going to trip over the rug. You will. And so, sadly, that's what a lot of people do because they don't want to have to, one, admit the loss and then actually have to feel it to heal it. So if you're just hopping on with us, tell me who you are, where you're from. Don't be shy, guys. My name is Renee. Welcome. Thank you for the likes. I do appreciate that. All those likes help. So if you guys can just keep tapping that screen, that's great. All right. So, and like I said, the whole thing is you cannot start healing until, you have to acknowledge the loss, right? And that's the hardest, is just acknowledging that the loss, that it happened. And then, okay, now what am I going to do to be able to move forward? And for me, like I said, therapy was out. My husband didn't leave me in a great spot financially. I knew I wasn't going to be a great candidate for group therapy because I am the circle that don't fit in the square. And so once I had decided I was going to stay on this planet, it's like, okay, I have to find a way to heal myself. And so that was the first big step, right? Is okay, I know that this happened. Now, what am I going to do? Because I can't stay here and continue the way I was going, right? I was absolutely miserable. So there again, you have to feel it to heal it. And that's why people don't heal, sadly. The anger, right? So we're back to the anger, the frustration. And I know, like I said, in my case, the anger was the hardest, because he left me in kind of a predicament at times. And so life had been a really big struggle for the last 2.5 years. And, I had never really even taken care of myself, right? That's one of the big things too. Thank you, Naughty Dog 69. Thank you for the roses. I appreciate that so much. I really do. And so, working through that anger was really a step-by-step process, right? And so what are some ways that we can work through the anger? For me, what worked for me is journaling. I did a lot of journaling to him that I was angry. I would go sit in nature, go walk in nature, touch some grass, touch a tree, hug a tree. I know everybody thinks that's silly, but it really does work. It does help with the healing process. So, I did a lot of journaling outside and crying. And one of the last really, really big steps for me was, even though I had already done this before and I thought that I had worked through my anger, was just basically letting him have it, right? And I'll tell you how bad my anger got, right? So one morning I got up to go to work. And my daughter had been living with me with my grandson, and she had left a poopy diaper in my trash. And while I was sleeping, my dog had gotten in the kitchen and got into the trash and chewed up the poopy diaper, right? And so when I went to the kitchen, I had a complete meltdown. And it had nothing to do with my dog or the poopy diaper. I was just, things in my life where nothing seemed to be going right at the time, right? And I was frustrated. And I was so frustrated and so angry with him. So now keep in mind, I am a medium, so I can hear him now. I didn't have those abilities. I didn't know I had those abilities when he first passed. And I just said to him, I was so angry that I said to him, stop talking to me. Just stop talking to me. Leave me alone. Go away. I don't want to hear from you anymore. Right? That's how angry I was. And so learning how to, one day he had rode with me to work in the truck, and I knew he was still in the truck when I came home because I could smell him. And I had been told, Renee, that next door you're waiting for isn't going to open because you're still dealing with that anger. And I'm like, but I don't know what to do. I don't know what's left, because I had already screamed and hollered at him several times, right, in those 2 years. And so I just started having a conversation with him, and I cried for the 20-minute ride home from work. And I just told him, I said, do you realize how hard it's been for me? Do you realize the position that you put me in and how hard, and pardon my French, it was really effing hard, and I'm angry with you for leaving me in a position like this, right? And just really pouring my heart out. There again, having to feel it to heal it. So if you're just hopping on, tell us who you are, where you're from. If you're not familiar, my name is Renee, and tonight we're talking about grief and the different stages of that. If you're unfamiliar with my story, my husband unalived himself 2.5 years ago. Good evening, Jesse. And so, like I said, I really had to go through those emotions, and that wasn't something, like I said, I had done it several times before, but that day was different, right? I really went through those emotions of how frustrated I was that he left me in that position, and I cried and I really poured my heart out to him. And I can tell you, in that 20-minute ride home from work, for the first time in 2 years, I finally felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. By the time I got home, it was like, okay, I think I finally healed this. And I think I had one more moment. If you're not familiar with my moments, it's okay to have a moment, just don't unpack and live there. And I had another moment in the fall, and I was able to journal to him for the first time in 2 years that I was no longer angry with him, right? That anger was gone. And I had finally come to peace with it. But there are many ways to deal with the anger, right? Like I said, you can journal, go outside. Nature is your best friend when you're healing. Go outside, take a walk. Hey, Jessica, thank you for the heart. Oh, thank you, Lulu. I appreciate that. But there's so many ways, right? If you're that angry, go to the thrift store, buy some plates, go somewhere, throw them, go scream, do what you got to do, right? But you have to feel it to heal it. That is the only way through it. And that's the step that everybody forgets, is that you have to feel it to heal it. Okay, so let's see. What else did I forget? Let's see. Like I said, scream, write, break something. If you have to, holler at them. Just holler. It's okay. For me, I lived in an apartment, so it worked out best that we had a conversation in the car on the ride home from my work, right? Because then I could scream and nobody could hear me. I could scream at him and tell him, like I said, I'm effing pissed, because, this, you did not leave me in a great spot, and it's been really effing hard, and so just let it all out, right? Don't unpack and live there, but let it all out. Feel it to heal it. So now we go down to the bargaining, right? We're dwelling. We blame, all those what ifs, right? The guilt. I actually got over the guilt pretty quickly. You come to find out, that, when you come to the realization that you're not responsible for somebody else's choices, right? And that's in my husband's case, right? If you just have a normal loss, maybe there isn't a lot of guilt there. But in my case, there was, right? You have those what ifs. What if I didn't leave him? What if I had walked back sooner? What if, right? But just like everything else in our life, we can't live on the what ifs, right? And you can say as many what ifs as you want, but that doesn't change the situation. It doesn't change the loss, right? Thank you for all the hearts, Jessie. I appreciate that. Okay. And like I said, knowing that you're not responsible, like in my husband's case where he unalived himself, you're not responsible for somebody else's choices, right? They are. So thank you for all the likes, guys. The depression, sadness, the emptiness, the loneliness, right? How do you deal with that? And one of the things, and like I said, I've been quite open about this too, is, I had never been without my husband. We were together since I was 16 years old. In that 32 years, we'd only been apart 2 weeks. And so, there was a lot of loneliness there for me, and understanding that loneliness and how hard it is to want somebody else, but also to learn that you don't need somebody else, right? Because a lot of times when you're in that spot of loneliness, you think you need somebody else to fill that void, right? And so for me, in my case, it was learning to figure out, first of all, who was I? Because after my husband passed, I didn't know who I was. Right? If you're just hopping on, tell us who you are, where you're from. My name is Renee. Welcome. We're not shy here, so pipe in anytime. But yeah, so like I said, in my case, it was figuring out, okay, who was I, right? Why was I lonely? Obviously I was lonely because he was always there, but there was still a little bit of an underlying issue for me, right? And so one of my issues was learning, like I said, who was I? And learning to love myself and being okay with who I was and being alone with myself, right? That was something huge that I went through last year. That loneliness, thinking that I needed to have someone because I had always had someone. And so, and like I said, this is just in my case, it's not with everyone. But, and like I said, once I learned that to love myself and to be happy with who I was and be alone, then it was okay. That loneliness kind of went away a little bit, right? And so let's see, the sadness, right? Obviously there's sadness there. So how do we deal with that? There again, journaling, cry, have a moment. The problem is that people either don't want to feel it or they over feel it, right? As in maybe you just stay in your bed all day and you don't want to get out of bed, and I can see where that's easy to do, right? In my case, I could have just laid in bed and felt sorry for myself and the position that he left me in and why me and poor me. But what good is that going to get you, right? Like that's not a life and they don't want you to live like that. And so, learning how to have a moment, and maybe you have 10 moments through your day of sadness, and like I tell everybody, it's okay to feel it, right? For me, if I was in the grocery store, sometimes I just felt it right there in the grocery store. It's your preference, right? Maybe you want to go to your car, whatever, wherever you're at, but let those emotions come, but don't unpack and live there. That is the biggest tip that I can give you is don't unpack and live there, right? Maybe you have a moment this morning and you have 5 more moments through your day, and that's okay. But don't unpack and live there, right? Have your moment and then go, okay, and keep moving forward, right? Keep putting one foot in front of the other. And so journaling, like I said, was huge for me. Finding your joy, right? Finding your joy and finding little moments of joy when life is really hard and you're having that loneliness and that sadness. Get yourself out, right? Call your friends, go to lunch, go have a coffee. For me, I had a bestie, thank God, who, would know my tone of voice and know that I was struggling and would say, come on, let's go. We're going for a drive or we're going to breakfast or we're going wherever, right? We're going to a movie, whatever it may be, right? So find little moments of joy. Let's see. But like I said, for me, it was learning to love myself through that whole process and realizing that, I loved me. I was comfortable being with just me and that I didn't need someone else. So like I said, my situation was a little different than some people who have loss. So what are some of the symptoms of grief, right? You're in shock, the numbness, fatigue, sleep disruption. That was huge for me. I did not sleep. I'm just finally now getting where I will have 6-7 hours of sleep. I lived off of 2 to 3 hours of sleep for 2 years. I don't recommend it. I was a basket case at some points. I would go to work and my boss would go, Renee, you're taking the weekend off because you're a basket case. Go home, get some sleep, turn your phone off, right? But for me, I struggled because I was so used to having somebody sleep with me, right? And so I think it's that security part of it. So sleep, or maybe you're sleeping too much. Like I said, taking that moment just little too long. You know what? Go take a shower, go for a walk, go sniff some flowers, go find some joy, right? You got to do that because they don't want you living like that. Not eating. That was a huge one for me. I struggled with not eating when my husband left. I didn't eat for 2 months and I lost a bunch of weight, and that wasn't a great thing. It wasn't the fact that I feel better now, without that, and some of the health issues that I was having are better because of that, but it wasn't a great way to do it, right? I don't recommend that. Thank you for the likes, Jessica. I do appreciate that. And self-care, right? For me, I started going to the gym. When my head would get muddled with all these thoughts of the what ifs or what am I going to do and how am I going to do this without him? I would go to the gym, walk on the treadmill, and that was my saving grace. Something about endorphins. That's all I know. So exercise is a great one. Go for a hike, call a friend, find a support system. The biggest takeaway that I want you guys to take away from this tonight is to know yourself, to know when you're okay and know when you're not okay, and you need to seek outside help, right? I think we all pretty much know ourselves pretty well to know, I know sometimes, I've been in some pretty down places in my life, and it's learning how to pull myself out, but know yourself well enough to know when you can't pull yourself out. And that's okay, right? It's okay. Reach out to somebody. Somebody is going to listen. Somebody will be there for you. Okay. Thank you guys for those hearts. I appreciate that. That's pretty much all I had tonight. Does anybody have anything that they wanted to talk about? Anybody had a loss that they need to talk about tonight? Anybody? Everybody is so quiet. Nobody? Anybody had a loss? Well, while I'm waiting to see if anybody is going to comment, or I don't know if TikTok's hiding comments again. They've been doing that a lot lately. If you're not familiar, I do have a YouTube channel. It's under Scorpio Medium. So all of the videos you'll find on here, you'll find uploaded over there. The only difference is I upload all my lives over there. So if you like my content, you like my lives, and you would like to go check them out, they're over on Scorpio Medium. That's where you can find them. I would love it if you went over there and subscribed. I try to be here Sunday through Wednesday. On Sunday nights, we just started a new thing with my friend Jen, my bestie, Real Talk with Renee and Jen. So we would love it if you joined us on Sunday nights. I'm here, like I said, Sunday through Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. I might be twerking that time again, guys, and I hate to do that, but trying to find a time that works. So we'll see where that goes. But right now, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Wednesdays, we are back to doing mini read Wednesdays. And we might be doing a little bit of medium stuff, but I'm not sure how I'm going to work that yet. We'll have to see. It's a struggle to do it on a live, but I had some thoughts, so we'll see how that goes. But right now, yes or no questions on Wednesday night. So if you got a question, you're just dying to know, hop on over and check us out on Wednesday nights for the mini reads, yes or no questions, psychic questions. If you're not familiar, I am a medium, a psychic medium. So if you are interested in a reading, and I actually have some of those available this week. I do have some openings this week and possibly next. I'm not sure next yet, but I do have a few this week. So get with me if you're interested and you want to talk to somebody who's crossed over. And you can do that through my bio down below. Send me an email. That's the only way I set those up, is through my email, or you can send me a DM on here. I do offer 30-minute sessions and hour sessions for those. I have a Venmo. And so if you do enjoy my content and you would like to leave me a tip, those are greatly appreciated. Never expected, but greatly appreciated. And that's down in my bio also. And last but not least, I have an email newsletter that's been going out since March. So if you're interested in just some information about, like this month, I talked about earthing, and just if you want some uplift, something that's uplifting for you every month, let me know your email. Send me a DM or an email, which is down in the bio again, to get your email put on the list. And I think that's pretty much everything I have. Does anybody else have anything they want to talk about? Anybody? Don't be shy, guys. How was everybody's day? Nobody wants to talk to me? I don't know if they're not letting comments come through or what. Or if everybody's just shy. Thank you for all the likes, guys. I do appreciate that. All right, guys. Well, since obviously I'm either not getting comments or nobody's commenting. Shy? Okay. Well, don't be shy here. We're not shy here at all. This is what my page is about. I created my page so, people, have a space to talk. If you just are lonely and you need a place, then welcome. Or if you've had a loss and you're not sure how to deal with that, that's what my page is for too. So I guess on that note, since everybody's shy, I hope y'all have a great night. I will be back here tomorrow night for mini reads. 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. I hope you have a great night. Remember to make tomorrow great because it is a choice, and I will see you tomorrow night.